makes sense to you.
Yeah, that's fine.
They would come every weekend.
No, I think just that one this week. Actually, there is something I want to ask you guys about this permit stuff. Is so, if that's the case, then if I can't get to be in my location, I just apply for a permit, so what's makes sense to me.
Budget house is okay. Budget house.
Must be.
It's the one that doesn't have a plug in. Yes,
FIT for 2017. Yeah, man. So, there we go.
exchange routines.
Okay, so we're going to show that Minion, Wells Fargo, and all the Pat stuff. That's kind of on his way, right? All the Pat stuff that we're dropping.
Did Fly's not coming? Or?
No, he is coming, but we're not doing resolutions on any of those. So that's why I was waiting for him, but we should get started. Okay, I'm online. Ready? Are we on? Here's Pat. Okay. All right.
Hey, Pat.
We're all waiting for Pat.
Apologies.
Ready to go.
Okay. I don't have my... There we go. So, calling to order the March meeting of ANC 3F. I'm Malik Nugent. I'm the chairman of ANC 3F and the commissioner for 3F06. So we'll start out by doing a roll call to establish quorum. And we start down at this end.
Andrea Molad, 3F05, Commission Secretary.
Deirdre Brown, 3F04.
David Dickinson, 3F01.
Pat Chakopchik, 3F07.
So that is our quorum, quorum being 4 for our commission, for voting, 4 present and voting. So we will move right into our agenda. The first order of business is to approve our consent and our regular agendas. So the way the consent agenda works is everything on here has been circulated publicly for at least a week for public review. When we vote and approve the consent agenda, anything on the agenda is deemed approved by consent. So I'll ask the commissioners if they have any, we'll make a motion, I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
And I'll ask if there are any concerns. None? Okay. We'll move to a vote. All in favor of the consent agenda? Aye. So it passes. So that means everything on the consent agenda passes, including your things. Then the regular agenda. I'll make a motion to approve the regular agenda. Are there any changes to the regular agenda?
Yeah, I'd like to propose an amendment, an addition to the regular agenda
Okay.
to add a resolution regarding the current Exelon Pepco rate case.
Okay. We'll add that before the discussion of Hearst Park. Yeah.
I think that we had a couple things to strike.
Yeah.
Okay, so the Wells Fargo one, we're going to move that off this agenda. And then we'll talk about that next month. And then the River Smart, then that we're going to table that as well. So those items will be stricken.
And Linian?
And Lanian will be moved to next month as well.
Okay.
Sorry.
So we are moving item 11 and 12. Wait, River Smart is next month?
River Smart's
Smart's
off.
Okay. We're moving items 11 and 12 to next month, and item 14 is off of the agenda. And we're adding a resolution about the Exelon Pepco rate increase. Any other changes or amendments? No? Okay, who's your second? Motion to approve the regular agenda as amended.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Passes.
Second half day.
Okay. So now we will move into the regular agenda. We'll start with commissioner announcements. I'll go ahead and start. I have a couple, actually. The first is a quick update on the Murch renovation, Murch Elementary modernization. They've completed the excavation for the parking garage and the basement, so that's the big hole that you might see, or actually you see the big mountain of dirt that came out of the hole. And they're about to start the foundation work, and then, so pouring the foundation for the parking garage. And then they will start working on the cafeteria. If anybody has questions or concerns, you should reach out to Patrick Davis, patrick.davis@dc.gov. He is the manager of the entire project. So if you have any questions or concerns about the project, reach out to Patrick. He's very responsive. Second is the Beach Drive update. You'll recall that we have asked NPS, the National Park Service, and DDOT to reroute the detour that was going to go through on Brandywine Street through Forest Hills. National Park Service, which actually controls the project, has agreed to make that change. So they're working with DDOT right now on the details. So that's good news. They're working on the specifics of the signs they'll have to put up and the signal timing, things like that. Third, Wyndham Place crosswalk. Back in September, some of you may recall, we passed a resolution calling for it was actually our second resolution in a couple of years, calling for a crosswalk at the south end of Wyndham. On Connecticut Avenue, on the south end of Wyndham Place. So right where the liquor store is, where Calvert Woodley is. There's a crosswalk on the north end of that intersection, not on the south end. We wanted to put one in to make it easier for people coming to and from UDC here, to the Fine Arts Theater, and also just to make it safer for people who cross there anyway. So they are finally working on that. They're moving forward with the project. They're going to install poles and signals, do the ADA ramps. There are some complicated bits that they hope to work out, but hopefully everything will be done by this summer, which is also good news. Fourth, just a quick announcement. You may not be aware but we do actually have a Facebook page. It's not very active, but we hope to make it more active. It's ANC 3F, not surprisingly. So check that out if you are on Facebook, and feel free to post and like and do all the other things people do on Facebook. And finally, the Tenley Tiger Run is scheduled for April 2nd, Sunday, April 2nd. That's a fundraiser for the Wilson High School track and field teams. It's going to be a 5K, a 1 mile run, and a toddler run. And I'm mentioning it just because you may recall we gave the parent-teacher, the Wilson boost, who was it? The Wilson track parent-teacher. We gave the parent-teacher organization a $2,500 grant to support this run, to purchase T-shirts. So that was in December we did that. So go ahead, sign up, get yourself a T-shirt. It's www.tenleytigerrun.com. It's for a good cause. Okay, and that's it for me. Andrea, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I just have one brief announcement. There have been a bunch of complaints from neighbors about accumulating trash in the little spit of National Park Service land behind Nebraska Avenue. National Park Service knows that this is happening. They think that it's them that needs to do it, but they're telling us that it's hard to get that to prioritize. The next step, I think, is to speak with Nick Gill, who's the owner of the strip of stores up there, who talked last year about a sort of quid pro quo with the National Park Service. They let his customers park on their little spit of land up in the parking lot, and he cleans that trash. So I will get in touch with Nick Gill. That's it for me.
Brown?
At the last meeting, we discussed 6 action items for the Forest Hill Playground. I've reached back out to DPR and I have an update. The chalkboard will be replaced. A purchase order has been submitted. We're just waiting for approval for the funding. We asked for 2 trash cans, a trash can and recyclable. The trash can has been put in. The recyclable can has been ordered, and we're waiting for DPW to install that. A crew did come out since the last meeting and remove the leaves, but the landscaping for the spring has not occurred yet. It will occur in the next month or so. The baseball field did have maintenance performed, but I've also been told that the pitcher's mount will be removed so that the field can be used for both softball and baseball. The sandbox, the contractor who is contracted to remove the sand and replace the sand in the sandbox has run out of funding in their current purchase order. So we have to wait for their agreement to be renewed, which should happen in the next few weeks, and then they will go in and address that issue. The other issues for the park, last Friday it was reported by a neighbor that the lights on the pathway had gone out again. DPR was notified, and as of Monday, yesterday, the lights were back on. I still am not sure why they keep going off and coming back on, but it was fixed. There is some complaints about when the weather was nice, when it was snowing, noise and people being at the park after hours, and that's an ongoing issue that's being addressed. The Friends of Forest Hills Playground had a meeting last week, and they are scheduling a cleanup on Saturday, April 8th from 10:30 to noon. If there is rain, the rain date is April 29th, and they're asking people to come out and bring brooms, rakes, and gloves. It's a family affair, so they're saying bring your kids and come enjoy hopefully a nice spring day on April 8th from 10:30 to noon. That's all I have.
Thank you. Commissioner Dickinson?
Yeah, thank you. I've got 4 or 5 items in no particular order. I was going to let people know that Mayor Bowser will be providing her 2017 State of the District speech, I think next Thursday, if that's March 30th, at 5:30 right here at UDC in the Performance Arts Center. I think you need to go online and reserve a spot if you're interested in attending that. Sticking on the theme of UDC, we will be holding our quarterly UDC Community Task Force meeting on April 12th. The task force meeting will meet at 6:30. They're actually meeting here in this room. Some of the agenda items include a discussion of the 4250 Connecticut Avenue development and also a presentation on gerontology. I'd also like to recognize, she's not here tonight, but former Commissioner Mary Beth Ray. Her and I both testified at a recent DC Council Committee on the Whole meeting, oversight hearing for UDC. Frankly, I think it went pretty well. And I'd also, as a personal aside, would like to thank UDC for allowing Hearst Elementary to hold its annual fundraising auction this Saturday at the Student Center. Turning a little bit to Hearst Park, DGS, and I announced this at the last monthly meeting, but DGS and DPR provided the community an update on the community survey, as well as some of the civil engineering assessments and other assessments that they're doing, as well as a discussion of their stormwater obligations at a February 15th, 2017 meeting at Hearst. In addition, and we'll hear a little bit more about this tonight, the Cleveland Park Citizen Association voted on a resolution pertaining to the project at its February 27th meeting. That resolution is available on the Cleveland Park Citizen Association website. Turning a little bit to Casey Trees, there will be 2 plantings that are relevant in this area that I'm aware of. On April 1st, this Saturday, they're conducting a tree planting on the west side of Melvin Hazen Park between Connecticut and Reno. I think all the volunteer slots are taken, but you might check on that, and I know they're continuing to be concerned about invasive species and weed control, so it's good to check that as well. In addition, Casey is doing a planting on the east side of Hearst Elementary. They did one last year, sort of surrounding the gym. This one's a little bit further in on Idaho Avenue toward the park. Special kudos to Mike Levin on Tilden Street for helping arrange that. I think the trees so far are taking hold that are helping mask the gym on Tilden Street. So those are just by way of announcement on Casey, and I invite people to take a look at their website and consider supporting them. They're a great asset to the community. I know that we may talk about what they might be doing in the Soapstone tributary as well coming up. That's all I have.
No general announcements from me today.
Okay. So we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the committee reports. Start with Parks and Trails.
So the Soapstone Melvin Hazen Parks and Trail Committee met last week. Special thanks go out to the Department of Energy and the Environment for sending Steve Sorry and Joshua Rodriguez to talk to our group in detail about some of the activities. Well, the microphone's not going to help, but I'll speak a little bit louder. Yeah, some of the activities going on in our neighborhood. We received some good news, particularly from Joshua Rodriguez, who announced that the water quality testing that he came and spoke about at last month's meeting is going to be expanded to include Melvin Hazen and the Hazen Run. So keep an eye out for that. We also had some preliminary discussions about expanding some citizen science efforts. And a group of us actually met with representatives from UDC's Causes program yesterday to explore that topic.
Which program?
Causes. To explore that topic more in depth. There are a couple upcoming events to learn more about citizen science. There's a webinar being offered on April 13th at 2 p.m. By the National Water Quality Monitoring Council. I'll put information about that on our website. And then there's going to be a meeting here at UDC on April 23rd, exploring citizen science more in depth. I know the agenda for that is still being drawn up, but once that's available, we will pass that on to the community. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The Streets and Sidewalks Committee met on March 15th. They're still working on their survey to go around and survey the neighborhood. There are 200 individual blocks in ANC 3F. We hope to cover all of them, but we need to come up with a system for doing that, so we're still working on that. I wasn't actually at the meeting, so Pat, is there anything you think we should add?
We are working on a way to report and categorize a number of the issues we have going on in our community related to the streets and sidewalks. Right now we're figuring out the best process for that, whether we'll make a call out to the general public or if it's something that the individual members of the committee can shoulder. We're still determining. If we do need your help, we'd love to have it, and just keep an eye out for information on our website about that.
Great. Thank you. Grants Committee?
Yeah, so just to remind folks, up until last year, ANC 3F received and gave grant money on a rolling basis. When they got submitted, that's when they got entertained, and we went to a twice per year policy this year. So the March applications were received for the March meeting. We'll discuss them and make recommendations and decide on them at the April meeting. We have 3 grant applications for this cycle. One is from Iona Senior Services. They're asking for $850 for the costs of printing what they're calling rack cards. They think that their old trifold brochure is a little clunky and people aren't using it well enough, so they're going to make these cards that have information that their constituents need. Another grant application that we have is from Hearst Elementary School Community Education Support. They're asking for $3,729 for tools and equipment that are meant to directly support the autism program, and that it's specific equipment to support their sensory and adaptive needs of the children in this program. And the idea is that if they have these equipment, the children can better sort of feed into the more of the mainstream parts of the school. The third grant that we have is from the Hearst PTA. They're asking for $2,401.72 for the purchase of 13 what they're calling kits, so that students can participate in the Lego robotics program. They're volunteering to kick in teachers that will help the students learn how to use this equipment, and tech support for that as well. So those are the 3 grants that we have. Excuse me?
Go ahead.
The grants committee will mull them over the next couple of weeks. We'll make recommendations to the commission as a whole, and we'll vote on the allocation of the grant money next month.
So, having received those 3 grants, what I'd like to do is offer the opportunity for the applicants to say a few words, just 2 or 3 minutes to introduce yourself and introduce the grant application, the purpose.
Yeah, and I'd actually like to introduce from the community or communication education support team at Hearst Elementary, both Ms. Marber and Ms. Molino, 2 wonderful teachers, and I'll just call it the autism program with respect, but they've been at Hearst for a number of years, or I think then they'll describe 20 to 25 students that, while they have their special education support, they also enter into the classrooms and participate very heavily. And I'm sorry to do this, but my daughter has become a great friend with a student there, and I'm very grateful for that, and I'm grateful that you're here tonight. So please come up and introduce your grant application.
Hi, can I ask you to introduce yourselves?
Sure.
Your name, spell it, etc.
Spell it? Okay. My name is Erica Molino, ERICA-MOLINO, and I'm the autism teacher for the upper grades. Some years I'm 3rd through 5th grade, and this year I'm 2nd through 4th grade because we have no 5th graders.
And I'm Alana Marber, ELANAMARBER. And this year I am the primary teacher, so I'm the younger grades. So I teach kindergarten and 1st this year. Sometimes it's K through 2, and we also have another classroom, which is the pre-K class, so for students who are 3 and 4 years old.
So every student, as you know, is entitled to a free and appropriate public education, and most students with disabilities go into the typical or regular classroom that many of your children may be in. However, and even if they have a disability, they're serviced their disability in that classroom. However, some students have more severe needs where they're in a more restrictive classroom, which we teach, which has no more than 8 students, 1 teacher with 2 assistants. These students have communication deficits, social deficits, behavioral deficits. We're very fortunate that we're at a school that gave us a sensory room, but they didn't provide us with sensory equipment.
It's a room that's attached to our main classroom. It's a small space that can be used for one-on-one instruction, or if you're not sure what sensory is, it appeals to the senses. It can be things, visual supports, physical supports, auditory supports, it ranges.
So a lot of our students have trouble regulating their behaviors, and a lot of these equipments we're requesting will help them to regulate their behaviors in more appropriate ways. So for example, right now if we have a student that has a meltdown, we might have to remove all the students from the classroom and they miss an hour of an instruction, and having these tools would help them learn how to regulate their behaviors, request a break, request to use the materials. And I actually have experience with this equipment because in my last district they did provide every autism classroom with these materials. Unfortunately, DCPS doesn't do that. You know, sometimes FAPE, free and appropriate education, is the bare minimum, reading, writing, but with our kids' needs, they need behavioral supports. Sometimes we have bite marks all over us because our kids can be aggressive, but that's because they don't have the tools always to help de-escalate them or escalate them if they're too relaxed.
And some of the equipment that we're requesting also not only works for times where they're having a meltdown or they need a break, but things to help them focus. So things like raised discs that they can put in their chair, so that if they're just sitting in a normal chair, which is provided by DCPS, they might have a hard time focusing on that instruction. But with that disc on their chair, some students may benefit by having that extra sensory input that they can feel while they're sitting on it, and that can keen them in and they can focus better on the instruction.
And lastly, our hope would be with this grant not only to have these materials and equipments our students have access to them, but the whole school, because there's many kids, that you don't even know have a disability. Maybe they have ADD. They could also benefit from this equipment. So even though it might be in our classrooms and our sensory rooms, all of the students could access it in the school.
So overall, it's pretty much our goal for all of our students to make it to move from our self-contained classrooms into the general education classroom, and having these supports will help them better be able to access and hopefully move on to the general education classroom, which can hopefully also make them better members of our community when they grow up. So.
Thank you again for coming
Thank
out
you.
tonight. I know it's been a long school day, so
Yeah.
Thanks
so
for
much.
having us. We
Sure.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else here from, or any of the other applicants here who wish to speak for a few minutes? No?
The representative from Iona said that she could not be here.
Okay. Okay, so as Commissioner Mala said, the Grants Committee will consider these applications, we'll make a recommendation to the full commission, then we will debate and vote on them next month. Finally, still on grants, I want to remind the recipients from our grants from last year that there are accountability requirements. Having received a grant, you need to make sure you get us all of the receipts and a statement of use. If the 5 grant recipients haven't done that, we need to make sure we get that soon. It's Forest Hills Connection, Iona Senior Services, Merch HSA, Forest Hills Neighborhood Alliance, and the Wilson PTSO. Okay, so moving right along, we'll move into Community Open Forum. This is the part of the meeting where we open up the floor to anybody from the community who wishes to speak about an issue. We ask that you not speak about something that's already on the agenda that we will be taking up later on, but if you have an announcement to make or a community issue you wish to raise, the floor is yours. Anyone?
Hello, I'm Ian Maggard. I'm the Ward 3 liaison for Mayor Bowser's office. Thank you, Commissioner Dickinson, for announcing the State of the District address is next Thursday. It's March 30th at 5:30 p.m. and it is right here at UDC at the Theater for Performing Arts. You can sign up at mayor.dc.gov and click on the State of the District address. So if you have any community issues or concerns, feel free to speak to me after the meeting. So thank you.
Hi everybody, it's Teresa with Van Ness Main Street, and I just have a few announcements. Next week on the 30th, when the mayor is going to be here, we will be hosting our next Jazz at VN. And so this is our monthly jazz series. We want our residents to come back into our great businesses. The next one's going to be at Tesoro, but put postcards back there, and it has all of the dates for the year. And it's free. We just ask you to, buy a drink or some food because we really want to help our local businesses. Our annual meeting is going to be April 29th at 1 p.m. at Soapstone. It's our new market, and we're very excited about doing it, and we hope everybody will show up, and we'll be doing a PowerPoint and a little report about what we've been doing over the last year. So put that on your calendar. It's a Saturday. It should be beautiful outside. Bring your kids. It'll be lots of fun. Our board chair, as ANC commissioner, not yet, Dickinson mentioned, testified at the University of the District of Columbia's hearing, and was very successful. She mentioned some of the partnerships we have with them, and one of them is, of course, our great office space, which is next to Acacia Bistro. And I always forget to tell you all to stop by. I'm in the window. I'm there all the time. So if you have concerns or questions or just want to say hi, I'm there often. And if I'm not walking around the neighborhood trying to help people out. I also want to let you know we have a clean team. And our clean team helps keep our neighborhood clean. And they also go all the way up to Chevy Chase. So if you see the guys with these nice yellow jackets on, they're incredibly wonderful guys. And please tell them thank you. We don't thank them enough. and they really, really, really work hard. So we're always happy to have them on our street. We recently met with the Bernstein Development, who's going to be working on the 4250 building. So we will let you know how that's progressing, but we're very excited. And we've also heard that one of our businesses will be leaving. That is Parkland Dry Cleaners will be leaving at the end of the year, but a new business will be coming in. So I just wanted to let everybody know that we're trying to make sure we lease up. So those are kind of some of the broad announcements. I guess the last thing is that we do have a call for DC makers and artisans for our farmers market that we partner with the University of the District of Columbia on. So I can give you, if you email me, I can send you the application. We're also looking for performers, and we do pay our musicians. It's very important to us. So we're looking for performers for the farmers market, and I can send you that application too. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Michelle Pouchot. I'm from the University of the District of Columbia, and welcome for your meeting here tonight. A few short announcements. Number one, snow removal. We got some concerns about snow removal on Connecticut Avenue. Hopefully we won't have to worry about it again for a while. But I just want to report that we did remove the snow on schedule, but we're raising our consciousness about accessibility, about pedestrian access. Everybody's trying to get to the metro in snow, so we're looking at ways to be able to remove that snow, especially before people have to leave for wherever they go in the morning. So we'll be changing our policy around that. Another thing that with the weather changing is the Merge School is co-located now on the university campus, and things are going pretty smoothly. But now that everybody is wanting to get outside, there's a lot of competition for the green space around the university. And so I just wanted to point out that sometimes we've recently had our fields redone, so sometimes there's no activity on the fields, but it's because there can't be because of the cycle that they're on and planting and greening and depending on the amount of rain or snow and what have you. So we're working really closely with Merge and the other entities that use those facilities. But we hear kind of a lot of negative back and forth sometimes. So I thought it would be a good opportunity for you to know that there is there's talks going on constantly. We meet weekly with Merge especially. And you all know that just fields are a premium in Washington, D.C., so we're doing as much as we can to facilitate all those uses. Another thing I like for the community to help us with, we have been seeing an uptick in graffiti. And so if you see graffiti on our campus, if you call 274-5050, that number is operational 24/7. That'll go to our security folks, and then we'll be notified that there's graffiti is there, and it'll be taken down. And so that's the most effective way to make sure we get the notification and that we deal with it immediately, which is the best way to discourage further graffiti. Something we're all interested in is the Bernstein property, 4250 Connecticut Avenue. And we've been, UDC is working with Bernstein to try to put student housing in that facility. We're in very detailed discussions right now about a potential leasing arrangement, but we're still in a very developmental phase. And so another announcement is there's a community campus task force meeting on April 19th. April 12th, thank you, in this room, and that will be one of the agenda items, and at 6 o'clock. What time? 7?
Well, why don't we
7.
compromise it?
Yeah, it's 7 o'clock. So. In this room at 7 o'clock.
Okay, I had 6:30, sorry.
6:30. So the meeting is Wednesday, April 12th at 6:30 p.m. in this room. And there is a public notice out there. But 4250 will be on the agenda, and we'll be able to present at least some more details about the UDC proposals, and depending on where we are, Bernstein may or may not be with us at that meeting, but we'll spend a little more time on that at that meeting. And as usual, there's lots of wonderful events going on at UDC. So tonight is the second of a 6-part series of guest lectures focused on Homeland Security. The next one will be April 4th. There is also, you've heard about, the mayor's going to be here next week. The task force, you heard about our oversight hearing. I do want to take a moment to thank the ANC and Van Ness Main Streets for coming out and just kind of raising the consciousness, and so that the council and the community who listens in could hear about our partnerships from our partners. So thank you for that. And tomorrow night, we do what we call the Big Read at UDC, where we have guests come in and talk about their books. Usually our last guest was Senator Cory Booker, and the auditorium was filled. Tomorrow night we'll have the Honorable Robert L. Wilkins, a judge who wrote the book Long Road to Hard Truth, the 100-year mission to create the National Museum of African American History and Culture, and he'll talk about the legislative process, so that should be interesting. And as always, Washington Performing Arts is actually here this Friday, David, and they'll have a trio there doing violin, cello, and piano, and there's lots of tennis and other sports activities at UDC. Hope you'll come out and enjoy. And you can learn about all of it on our website, which is www.udc.edu. Any questions? Thank you.
Is this mic really working?
That microphone for the broadcast.
My name's David Meadows. Good evening. I'm Chief of Staff to your at-large Councilmember Anita Bonds. We have 10 staff members. It's very hard for us to make our way across the entire city, but we did want to come in and see what ANC is up to here in Van Ness. And I have some materials just for you to, I'll leave them in the back, no need to read them now. But just know that, Councilmember Shea and Mayor Bowser, they have great staffs and everything, but just be understanding that we're here also for you. We do represent you. Mr. Dickinson, Councilmember Bonds was a ANC commissioner for 8 years, and she was a chair for 4. So what you were saying earlier, you never know what happens. And certainly the council is in the midst of their oversight hearings. We have pretty much we're about to conclude the agency oversights, and we are moving into the budget hearings. So that's going to go all throughout the month of April and halfway through May, and hopefully by June, with your input, a budget will be passed by mid-June is usually when the budget's rounding up. And so we've met with, I see on your schedule you have Hearst School here today. We've met with the pro and anti groups. We're looking to hear from what you guys have to say on that. And I just wish there could be a way to perhaps build the pool on top of the pool house, and to save that space. But that's my personal idea. And thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else like to speak? No? Okay, thank you. Then we'll move on to the next item on our agenda, which is the resolution supporting 3101 Albemarle Street Historic Preservation application. Now, we have discussed this issue twice now over the past 2 months, starting in January and then again in our February meeting. We've discussed the merits of this particular application for historic designation of the property at 3101 Albemarle Street. So I don't intend to go into a lengthy discussion again here tonight. The purpose of this resolution is for us to, I'll read it to you. The operative clause is, therefore be it resolved that ANC3F officially supports the application for landmark designation of 3101 Albemarle Street, as the property possesses the following qualities that make it eligible for historic designation. A, events. It's the site of events that contributed significantly to the heritage, culture, or development of the District of Columbia or the nation. And B, individuals. It is associated with the lives of persons significant to the history of the District of Columbia or the nation. So I'm going to make a motion to approve this resolution as it stands, and I will ask for a second. And then we will open it up for commissioners to comment on the resolution.
Wasn't there a friendly amendment?
Yeah.
Yeah, was that?
I don't know if it made it into that copy, but I can read it out.
It's not in this copy. So
I'm going to read it out since it wasn't. So we're going to add a final whereas, just kind of recognizing that this property's significance is doing a lot to its own individual merits. And so that whereas reads, whereas ANC3F recognizes this property's unique role in contributing to the broad patterns of our history and has evaluated this application on its own individual merits.
And that was accepted as a friendly amendment to the resolution. That's not included in the draft that's been online for the last week. Are there any other comments, questions from the commissioners? Okay, so I will ask if there are any brief comments from anybody in the audience. As I said, we've discussed this now twice, so I don't think we need to go into a large debate about it. But if anybody wishes to comment. Okay. Then we will move to approve. We'll move to our voting. So all in favor of the resolution as amended? Aye. Opposed? None? So it passes 5-0-0. Okay. Thank you. All right. Moving on. Next item on the agenda is a resolution regarding DC's use of surplus local revenue. So I'll hand it over to Commissioner Mullen.
Yeah, so let me just tee this up briefly. We have a resolution. Basically the text, the whereas clauses in the resolution say that there's a regulation / policy that was been adapted by the council in 2014 that basically dictates that anytime we have a revenue surplus or that the revenue exceeds what the expected value was, it has to be returned in the form of tax breaks to the public. And we are proposing a resolution that asks the council to please reconsider this, especially in the current climate where we think a good surplus would be needed in the face of any cuts that may be coming, and there may be other projects that the council should be able to decide how to spend our surplus money rather than necessarily have to have it mandated to go back. And so these are called tax cut triggers. When revenue exceeds a certain amount, it triggers automatic tax cuts. And so we're asking, again, that the district reconsider this. I can read into the record the operative clause. It says, again, whereas, lots of tax cuts has already come, therefore be it resolved that ANC3F hereby advises the mayor and the DC Council, 1, to delay tax cuts for a year and use some of the growing surplus for urgent needs for residents of ANC3F and the district as a whole, such as affordable housing, schools, and metro. And 2, to set aside some of last year's surplus in a special fund of, it says approximately, but at least should be the word, $20 million specifically to address federal budget cuts that may come after the DC budget is adopted, to ease the pain and to give us time to adjust, as called for in the, quote, Reserve Fund Improvement Amendment Act of 2017, which was introduced by Councilmember Grasso. Be it further resolved that ANC3F hereby signs on to the DC Fiscal Policy Institute's January letter calling for the mayor and the DC Council to untie their hands.
Okay, thank you.
That's it.
So we'll make a motion to accept this resolution. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion or debate from the commissioners? Any comments, discussion, debate from the community?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that the last surplus was $266 million, and if the council moved ahead on these tax triggers, it would put the city 4 years in advance for taxes. Your standard deduction, which has increased, has pretty much doubled within the last 3.5, 4 years. So this would advance those tracks. If we took the surplus, it would advance it about 4 years as when it was originally projected. Does that make sense?
Not to me.
Yeah.
Maybe to everyone else.
You want to come up to the mic, by the way?
Yeah.
Please.
When the city council voted on the tax triggers, there's 27 of them. I believe it's 27 or 26. And so what happened is that surpluses came in, triggers were triggered. And now we are almost at the end of all the triggers. And if we hit that final trigger with our $266 million surplus, that would put the triggers 4 years in advance of when originally it was planned to take effect.
Okay.
Send me a copy of that if you don't mind.
Of course.
So you're saying untying the council's hands is a good idea?
I am saying Councilmember Bonds is
Supportive of this. Okay. All right. Any other comments, questions? Okay. All in favor of the motion? All right. None opposed, so it passes 5-0-0. Great. Thank you. Okay, we are going to move on to the resolution regarding the Public Service Commission rate case 1139. This is also one that Commissioner Mollad can set up for us.
Yeah, so again, briefly with the whereas clauses and things, there's a Pepco, Exelon, they keep trying to say Pepco, but it's Exelon/Pepco these days. We shouldn't forget about who took over who. So they've requested a $76.8 million rate increase. This is unprecedented by far. It constitutes a 21% increase in the distribution rates. That's the part of your electric bill that is the connection charges and things like that, aside from the actual power that you get. This would increase their profits by 13%. So the basic idea is the Office of the People's Counsel has reviewed this, and they are recommending that only a third of that rate increase be given and be allocated by the PSC. And so our resolution is essentially to say that we support the recommendations of the Office of the People's Counsel and that they should not be given this kind of rate increase. There is suspicion that there is an attempt in the rate increase documents to recover some of the costs of the merger, which is explicitly prohibited in the merger documents. And so Office of the People's Counsel is keeping a close eye on this, and they've recommended, again, this 1/3 cut. And so let me read into the record the operative clauses here. Therefore, be it resolved that ANC 3F hereby advises the Public Service Commission to grant Exelon Pepco no more of a rate increase than the approximately $26 million advised by the Office of the People's Counsel, which would translate to a return on common equity of 8.6% of Exelon. Be it further resolved that ANC 3F authorizes Commissioners Andrew Mollad and Malachi Nugent to speak on behalf of the Commission to members of the Council and the PSC and at PSC hearings on this matter.
Okay. So we'll make a motion. Is there a motion to approve this resolution? Andrea?
I make a motion to approve the resolution.
I second the motion.
Okay. Any debate? Comments from the Commission? None? From the community? Anyone wish to speak on this topic? No? We'll move to a vote. All in favor? Passes unanimously, 5-0-0. Great. Thank you. Okay, so now we're going to move to our discussion of Hearst Park, the Hearst Park and Pool Improvement Project. So this is a project that has gotten a lot of attention in the community and citywide. And so we have asked two neighborhood groups to come in and speak to help educate the commission about the issues involved with this improvement project. I know there have been some community meetings. Commissioner Dickinson has been at several of them. But as we move forward as a commission to make a recommendation to the council and to the mayor about this project, we felt it was important for us to understand all of the various issues involved. So we've invited two of the groups to come in and speak tonight. So
and I'll go ahead and introduce Miss Sarah Brown, or I don't know, Diane, are you?
Sarah. My voice has been failing.
Right.
So
Okay, so why don't we go ahead and introduce the neighbors of Hearst Park and come on up to the mic. I'm sorry? I think isn't it the neighbors of Hearst Park? Yeah. And then we'll have the Friends of Hearst Pool follow.
So who's first?
Yeah, you're both representing it.
Yeah. Bless you.
Thank you.
Can we put the, yeah. Everybody introduce yourself. Yes. Good evening. My name is Sarah Brown, and my colleague here is Diane Hartley. We were going to do a Huntley-Brinkley, which some of you may remember, but Diane has a bad cold, so I'm going to try and do both of it, both sections.
I'm going to ask you to keep your remarks to about 10 minutes.
Yeah, I will. I'll try. I've been trying to get this down. Okay. Diane and I represent the Neighbors for Hearst Park tonight. This is a group of about 120 families, many with kids, who live in the Hearst Park area. What we're here for tonight is to ask for this ANC 3F support of our effort to have the site selection process for a Ward 3 pool reopened so that better sites can be considered, with Hearst Park itself preserved and restored as it now is. The way to get this done technically is to remove the designation of Hearst Park in the 2017 budget allocation for a Ward 3 pool. You should know that we have already gotten strong support for our position from the Cleveland Park Citizens Association, the Cleveland Park Historical Society, and the DC Stoddard Soccer League. We need yours as well. That's why we're here. We are not anti-pool. We're not NIMBYs. Rather, we are pro-citizen involvement and pro an open, careful selection process that gives our ward the full-size pool we deserve with minimal negative effects on the surrounding environment and neighborhood. Now, Play DC, which, as you may know, is DC's master plan for recreational facilities in all areas of the city, was completed just over 2 years ago in 2014, and it called for an outdoor pool in the far corner of Ward 3, close to Western Avenue. Those are the circled areas. Note that the two suggested sites for a new Ward 3 pool are in the far reaches of Ward 3 near Western Avenue. That was considered to be the most underserved area. Hearst Park, however, shown as the red heart, is not in the underserved area, which is the blue-gray shaded part. This master plan provided that Hearst Park stay an open green space and that its current existing uses should remain in place. In citing a pool here, therefore, the city is violating its own master plan.
The FY 2015 budget appropriated $5 million for an outdoor pool in Ward 3, but then the FY 16 budget upped this sum to $6 million, which is nice, but then out of the blue specified Hearst Park as the pool location. To find out how Hearst was selected, our group filed Freedom of Information Act requests with the Department of Parks and Recreation and DGS as well, seeking any and all documents, emails, whatever, related to the selection of Hearst as a pool site. Both agencies replied that they had no documents to share, showing clearly that no other sites were carefully considered in any serious way and no feasibility studies were done. Now, please note that DC law, DC Code Section 8109.03, requires that any project that will cost over $1 million, as they surely will, for those alternative sites and costs must be assessed and documented with the pros and cons of each shown, each option. Our group then, doing what the city should have done, and I give Diane full credit here, has identified 14 alternate sites in Ward 3, all on public land, a lot of it National Park Service land, which might accommodate a pool. So you see them there. We can talk about them later if you want. Now here's what we've learned about the district's current plans. 3 sites for a pool within Hearst have been proposed. All 3 show a pool with about a 15,000 square foot footprint, including the pool deck and pool house. This means that the actual pool would be about 75 feet long, which is smaller than the size of a single tennis court. It would be one of the smallest public pools ever built in the city, about a third the size of many other city pools. Now on this next slide, we have shown a pink rectangle around those areas just to make it a little bit clear. That's the pool and all the associated buildings and so forth, chemical storage, everything. Now the next 2 slides, slides 9 and 10, show the footprint of the Upshur Pool complex in red and the Francis Pool complex in blue. And I think these make clear how small the structures and plans are for Hearst that the city plans to build. The next slide shows more data on other pools in the city. We can go into this later if you want. I just want you to have it for the record. Its key finding is that pools of this small size are only in wards that have 3 or 4 outdoor pools. That's wards 5, 7, and 8. Of the city's 8 wards, only 1 and 4 have a single outdoor pool. And Ward 1, for example, their pool is over 3 times larger than the proposed Hearst Park pool. We have also learned, in particular, that the city has not done any comprehensive studies of the impact of these options on the park trees, both the 14 heritage willow oaks and many others too. We were so concerned about this that our group hired Pickford Associates, arborists who are well known to the DC government and forestry communities, to assess the risk to the trees, not just by the pool itself, but also by the immense construction process. They conclude that the trees will be severely affected by the construction process alone, trucks, equipment, fill, piles, and the assault on will continue after the pool is in place. All 3 options place the tree canopy at risk. I have given all of you commissioners a copy of their report with the summary points. And I have extra for anybody here who might want to see it. In addition, the city has also not done any hydrology, drainage, water studies, and this is a huge concern that you've already flagged in your own resolution passed in September on the Soapstone Valley Melvin Hazen Trails Committee work, which you just mentioned a minute ago. Dan, can you, yeah. As you know, every additional square foot of concrete pool decking and pool houses decreases the ability of the park to absorb water. This is just a recent shot from our street, Springland Lane. Dealing with these issues alone will increase costs significantly. Now, it's probable that the district will try to address these issues in part by creating so-called bioswales, which are big pits of rock that are designed to collect and absorb water. We'll just dwell on that for a minute. Here are the bioswales that the district built when Hearst School was expanded. It's not a pretty sight, and they're not fully successful. In addition, the city has not done any geology studies that address the uncertain and unstable substrate of the park. They haven't done any environmental impact studies as required by law, which I mentioned a moment ago. No studies of public transportation, parking, and traffic effects. And they have no clear estimates of expected use. I mean, how many people do we think are going to use this pool? Ward 3 has 77,000 people, and this would be the only outdoor pool. Studies on the pool's impact on popular existing uses, remember, is something that Play DC asked would remain intact for Hearst, no interference with those existing uses. But all three options would shrink the main soccer field of Hearst in particular, which means that the field could no longer accommodate high school level soccer or adult 11 by 11 teams. And in response to this potential loss, Stoddard Soccer has sent a strong letter opposing the Hearst pool in no uncertain terms. I mean, this city needs more outdoor recreational space available for year-round use and not less. And one proposed option not only shrinks the soccer field, but also removes one of the tennis courts and the much-used backboard. All this, again, despite the fact that the master plan asks that current existing uses of Hearst should remain in place. We would have year-round chain-link fencing, pool houses and storage units, night lighting, and all of us, of course, would continue to experience the poor record of DC maintaining public facilities. Wilson Pool has been closed twice this winter. Why would this pool be any different? What's the track record that would make us confident? It would not only be an eyesore, but it would be the total antithesis of a well-planned open green space. And finally, we have heard from people near the Volta pool that it is so poorly maintained and staffed that local citizens have had to raise money every year for maintenance and for qualified lifeguards. So, bottom line, our neighborhood is being asked to shoulder immense risk and loss for a very small pool that clearly will not serve Ward 3. Given all of these concerns, we respectfully request that ANC 3F call for the removal of the budget specification designating Hearst as a site for a new Ward 3 pool, which we look forward to, so that we can all work together to find a better site, one that would allow a full-size community pool and one that does not permanently harm a much-loved, heavily used, and increasingly precious park. Did I make it under 10 minutes?
You did. 9 minutes and 49 seconds.
Yeah! Okay. So I have a more complete version of the statement that I just read in abridged form of and the tree report, a few more copies here for the commissioners as well.
Ms. Brown, can you submit that to us electronically? And I will work with our administrative assistant to make sure we start creating a more comprehensive
I'd be happy to.
Site on our website for Hearst Park, and we'll include that in any other materials you'd like to submit, as well as from other interested groups.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll send in those other 3 letters.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was very useful.
Let's talk for questions.
Mm-hmm. Let's do the second presentation and then we'll ask questions. Okay, thank you. So we have a second presentation. I'll ask Commissioner Dickinson to set this one up too.
Yeah, this is just the, no, I shouldn't say just, this is the Friends of Hearst Pool, and I guess I would like to say, I know that we have someone from Councilmember Bond's office. Personally, and I don't mean to interject or editorialize, but I've appreciated the work that both groups have put into this, and I know that we're also looking for a great Hearst Park project, and I look forward to the groups working together along with the ANC. So welcome tonight.
Thank you, and thanks for inviting us. My name is Caroline Mehta. This is Tracy Sachs.
Excuse me, can I ask you to spell?
Sure. Mehta is M-E-H-T-A. And Tracy Sachs, S-A-C-K-S. Jonathan, her husband, who's part of Friends of Hearst Pool, is filled with fever at the moment, so he sent his poor wife in instead. But we'll try to do what we can. I want to start with about this idea about the furthest reach of Northwest DC being an underserved area. Tracy and I are raising young children in Cleveland Park. We are parents at John Eaton School. We support the neighborhood. We send our kids to DCPS. And I will tell you that on a hot Saturday morning, we pack up our stuff and we go to a public pool outside of the ward. And so I'm struggling to understand as an initial matter how Ward 3 is not considered, or Cleveland Park is not considered an underserved area if you don't have access to private pools, which we have chosen not to. In terms of support, we talked about, Ms. Brown talked about the CPCA, the Historical Society, and Stoddard. I want to touch on those because what she didn't talk about was the survey that was conducted by the DC government, which showed 72% of the respondents, and it was well over 1,000 respondents, supporting a pool at Hearst. The CPCA's resolution, which you can all look up online, essentially said, we want to make sure the proper studies are done, but assuming that they are, and that there is satisfaction that it is a proper site, we should not remove the Hearst earmark. The Cleveland Park Historical Society, that was really kind of out of the blue because, frankly, Hearst, this pool and park is not within their jurisdiction. The person who wrote it happens to have a house that abuts the park. As for Stoddard, you can look at that letter. It's on our website as well. And as I read it, they are very firm about not wanting to infringe on existing soccer uses, but it is not a per se opposition to the pool. This is an issue with great and, in my view, disgraceful history in the city. At our CPCA meeting, a fellow who was on the ANC for the Turtle Park area stood up and he shared an article that was in the newspaper 50 years ago. 50 years ago, small vocal minority block pool in Ward 3. And it's fascinating that here we are 50 years later, and with 72% support, we are seriously having a conversation that we can't find room for a 25-meter park a 25-meter pool in a 4-acre park. In terms of the size, this may only be our only pool, but it's at least a start. This is, I think, approximately the same size as Volta Park pool, which is well used. And the thing that we have in common with the neighbors of Hearst Park is that Jonathan and I and all the people who are supportive of the pool, but equally care about preserving the trees, equally care about the park being a wonderful community resource. And so our view is it's time to engage. It's time to engage with the architects. It's time to engage with the city. I do have a problem, I have to say, with a well-funded effort to hire a private arborist that shoots down all three options if we haven't had people from the city weighing in. And there are some very talented arborists within the district government who need to get engaged, and we completely agree they need to get engaged. Jonathan and I go to these meetings and we care very much about this issue for our families. We think it's an issue of supporting younger families in Ward 3. But we also don't think we should be asked to respond to every technical question on behalf of the city. And there have been, as you all know, several public meetings with, I'll name as many as I can think of, DPR, DGS, DOEE, DC Aquatics, folks from the mayor's office. There has been a lot of good, thoughtful data and answers put to a lot of these questions. And one of the challenges of these meetings, even though we're very happy to be here, is that you really kind of need those people in the room to talk about how the plan has come together and how they plan to execute it without this sort of parade of horribles coming about. A couple of other points. The bioswales, as far as I understand, that picture of an ugly thing that Ms. Brown put up, are part of the plan in any event. They actually don't relate to the pool. They relate to existing hydrology issues in the park. And so they are going to happen in some form anyway. So I don't think that that should be associated per se with the pool. Parking and traffic, this is challenging to think about, because if you drive that area, and I live right in that area, on a weekend, there are no cars on the streets surrounding this park. And one of the other proposed sites, which is, let's put it behind the McDonald's, there is no parking there. I mean, the proposal was, the answer to that was, well, there's 2 public parking garages. You should not have to pay to park in a parking garage to swim in a pool behind a McDonald's with power lines everywhere the eye can see. Tennis courts are wonderful. I looked at DPR's website today. There are 24 public tennis courts in Ward 3, 0 outdoor pools. So I'd like to just kind of keep some perspective in terms of use of, not only looking at it from a utility perspective, which is that tennis courts are wonderful, but as far as I can tell, there's only 4 people on them at any time. And there's hundreds of kids and families in Ward 3 that could enjoy a pool on a hot day. I just don't think the tennis courts ought to be, or losing a tennis court at Hearst ought to be a driving factor here. The remainder of what Ms. Brown touched on are really design issues. I just don't think it's fair to conclude this will be an eyesore. There will be chain link fences. Her prior presentation has piles of garbage overflowing. Look, we are clear-eyed and realistic about DC's track record of maintenance, and we're concerned about it. And Jonathan and I have had many conversations agreeing that if this thing is going to be a slab of concrete, if it's not going to be maintained, if we don't see commitment from the district to have engagement on the design, engagement about protecting those willow oaks, then we're not going to be supportive. But we just don't think that all those things are impossible to reconcile. In fact, we think they're very possible to reconcile. And every outreach that we've made to anyone on the DC side involved with the project, including the architect who we'll be meeting with, I think, in the next few days, they've been extremely receptive. I believe one of the pieces of the Cleveland Park Citizens Association resolution, I might be wrong about this, but I believe it's right, is that no matter what, there should be citizens participating at the design phase and thinking through a lot of these issues and being concerned and hearing good data about trees, hydrology, and other issues. But, I just have to say, and I hope I haven't used my 10 minutes, we do have slides, but they're also available on Friends of Hearst Pool. We have an option that we call 1A that we think does the minimal amount of, has the minimal amount of impact in terms of soccer fields, and also tucks the pool house and the pool into the hillside, right where one of the tennis courts is, in such a way that you're really keeping the idea of a recreational campus, which was what DC set out to do with Hearst, without having all of these negative impacts that you've been hearing about. So I would encourage you to check that out. We are very aggressive about pressing our opinion about option 1, 2, or 3, but we're not ready to throw our hands up and say this just won't work. I've lived in Cleveland Park a while now. I love it. I want to stay. But this is an issue that repeats and repeats and repeats itself, and it is time to be supportive of a public facility that serves young families, that really is welcoming to people across the city to come in one of the hottest cities in the world and swim on a hot day. So that's all that, we would ask you to join us in this kind of effort to engage. Our greatest fear is that we lose that earmark, and that money is gone. I don't think we should kid ourselves. We'll be having this conversation in another 5, 10, 15, maybe 50 years. But I'll end with the thought from the fellow from the ANC right near Turtle Park, and he said, Caroline, we lost this over one softball field. And nobody would have missed that softball field. Don't make the same mistake. So that's our perspective. We are reasonable, thoughtful people who care about the neighborhood, but we don't think that opposition to this pool outright makes any sense.
Okay, thank you. I'm gonna stop you there.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna ask Ms. Brown to come back up to the microphone. I'm gonna ask the commissioners if they have any questions for you, and then if you have points that you'd like to make in answering the questions, I welcome you doing that. I will start with a question for you. Saying, can you explain to me, you support the idea of a pool in Ward 3. Does it have to be at Hearst Park?
I mean, I'm looking at this from a realist's perspective. This Hearst Park was selected. I know that they have issues about how many other sites were not considered, but Hearst Park actually, to me, makes a tremendous amount of sense. I live right near it. I don't really consider it overutilized, but we can argue about that all day. But it is a 4-acre park that would actually make for a really beautiful recreational campus that includes a pool. I personally have a lot of reservations about the let's kick the can down the road and reopen all the site options, because that's I really think the council is going to throw up their hands and say Ward 3 just doesn't want a pool, and let's just face facts. Mm-hmm. So does it have to be at Hearst? No. But this keeps on repeating and repeating and repeating, and we don't get closer to having this amenity that every other ward has.
May I respond to that?
No. To her response? No. I'm going to ask everybody to respond just to the commissioners, okay? So, Pat, do you have questions you'd like to raise?
Could you tell me a little bit more about this option 1A that you talked about?
Pull up the slide. Yeah, go ahead.
There's a slide.
Okay. And just before you get, this isn't something that's under consideration.
No, except that we have shared it with the city's architects and are there, as far as we can tell, open to the conversation. So it's the next one.
This one?
Nope. It says 1B.
Yep.
That's
it.
I got it wrong. It's 1B.
So it's essentially just flipping the pool from the front to the back. So the back corner, the top left corner, is where the actual pool house would be. It would be nestled back. So from the street view, you would just have a nice view of the tennis courts, and then the pool house is an L-shaped, kind of nestled back. So it's just literally flipping it catty corner to the opposite side. We also spoke with the arborist that they hired, and he mentioned that there was plenty enough room to go back into that area without disrupting any of the trees. Those trees back there are actually ash trees, which he also indicated are being ravaged by disease, and he doesn't see them having a life beyond the next 4 years. He also said that if the construction were to be staggered in such a way that the pool was last, that they could stage all of the construction materials on top of where the tennis courts are, build the pool house, and then dig out the pool last, and therefore none of the construction materials would be on those willows.
And so does that lose the tennis courts too? Is that, I'm just trying to look at it.
So that would be just losing one of the tennis courts, which is exactly what the option that they recommend anyway. The back wall you could just build another back wall.
Mr. Brown, do you have other questions?
I have questions for neighbors.
Okay.
Yeah. So let's talk about the alternative sites. If you could just go into that a little bit more. Did you say that they were all on NPS land?
The majority are, and I feel a responsibility to report to you that we went and talked with Eleanor Holmes Norton's office about these alternative sites, because most of them are National Park Service land. I'm sorry, I thought this we went and, does this go on? No.
That's just broadcasting.
That's
through
what
our live stream.
Our group went and spoke with Eleanor Holmes Norton's office, and we talked about these alternative sites, which does take some doing to get, we understand that. But she said if groups like this ANC were supportive, and if the mayor's office were supportive, that she would work very hard with all of us to secure one of these other parcels of land in Ward 3, in the underserved area, and go to bat and get a larger pool in a larger site that's more appropriate and doesn't do damage to the trees. And incidentally, our analysis is that these trees are under threat by all options, even if you slide the pool different ways. Plus, of course, the problem with option 3 is that it faces right on to 2 residential streets. This would now be in the front yard of people on Quebec Street, just as if you put it this way, it's in the front yard of people on Idaho. So you're asking people to have a chain link fence and Marco Polo in front of them, right in their front yard, essentially, having not been consulted at all.
Other questions?
So those parcels are not, they're not DC controlled, but they're NPS controlled. Hearst, incidentally, is a National Park Service parcel of land.
Commissioner Brown, do you have any questions? No. Commissioner Dickinson?
Yeah, I guess I've got a couple. First, thanks again for both groups taking the time this evening. I know you've struggled with this probably for near a year now or so, and I know we kicked this off, I think, last May when DGS and DPR first came out. I think in January of this year, a representative from DPR, their new guy, so to speak, came and gave us survey results. We haven't heard as a commission from DGS and DPR and perhaps the other sort of critical parties here, DOEE and DDOT. But I would be making a recommendation to our commissioners that we bring them back in as well for an update. I thought they did a fairly good job. Maybe not everybody was in attendance, but February 15th, they had a meeting and they started to address, they had folks from DC Aquatics that addressed their goal of siting a pool within a sort of a mile and a half diameter of the next pool, and trying to devise, not by wards per se, but try to devise a scheme where they would serve every community in the city based on this 1.5 mile diameter concept. So there were guys from DC Aquatics, there were folks from DDOE, including Steve Sari, that talked about stormwater. There might be a difference of opinion about what, these aren't really questions, I'm just pontificating, sorry. But I just want to make sure the community is informed that a lot of these issues the district is starting to address. I would recommend that the commission invite those folks back in following that meeting. I'm not sure there's anybody in the room, but following that meeting, I know the neighbors of Hearst Park met with Councilmember Che. I was also in attendance. Steve Sari from DDOE was there. Several reps from DGS. A wonderful woman from Urban Forestry was there. So there was lots of discussion about stormwater obligations, whether the district could go forward with funding and putting a shovel in the ground unless there were assurances on stormwater. I asked from DPR for sort of a schematic of the city and the 1.5 mile concept to see where those little circles coincide in Ward 3 and with the rest of the city. And similar to the idea that you floated up above near Western Avenue and how that all coordinates, because I think the ANC needs to be informed whether Cleveland Park is, is it 10 miles from anywhere? Is it 2 miles from anywhere? What does Western Avenue look like? So the woman from Urban Forestry also, I believe, is supposed to submit a plan to us and to the community that talks about sort of the harm zone associated with each of the 14 to 17 trees there, which I think will inform us and inform the architect. So I don't know how many. I know the Friends of the Pool were not at that meeting. I'm not sure whether the the neighbor representatives tonight want to characterize that meeting and also characterize the resolution from the Cleveland Park Citizen Association, and I had an opportunity to attend that, but I didn't see that they were asking for the removal of an earmark. And by the way, I'm not convinced that there is an earmark, but can you characterize what the Cleveland Park Citizen Association did? Is that it's Sarah Brown.
Well, this was a group that adopted a resolution which we're happy, I mean, you can see it, we'll send it to you,
right,
which listed all these undone studies, all these very real risks and other opportunities in Ward 3 for a pool, and said unless that group, this is a citizens association, can be assured that all of these issues have been fairly addressed in an open way that involves all of us, so that we have input and can read the reports and comment on them, that unless that's done, they will oppose it. On the other hand, if all of the studies are done and all the considerations of other sites and so forth, then they'll support it. And I even think that's true for us. If a full faith and open process is done, whereby all of these other sites, possibilities are looked at sincerely, and the true risks to Hearst Park are documented and looked at, it may end up at Hearst. I don't think so, but that's a possibility that is embraced by the Cleveland Park Citizens Association resolution. The issue here is how we make a decision. And what's happened is that a decision has been made without adequate process, without adequate attention to very real risks and concerns. We're not making these things up. We need to open it up again, and I don't think we'll lose the money if we lose the earmark. It's still earmarked for a pool in Ward 3. Mystically, it came into Hearst Park. What we need is an open process to look at the options that are available to us in Ward 3 in the underserved area, and look at stormwater and cost and drainage, and then make a decision. Right now, there's been a highly flawed and closed and imperfect process that has resulted in one day all of us just said, wait, we just heard there's going to be a pool up here. The people who live even right next to it never were asked, never were consulted, knew nothing about it. That's the essence of this problem. It's not about a particular study or a particular anything. It's that we've had no input and we have grave concerns, and they seem to increase.
Let me ask. Thank you. The Cleveland Park Citizen Association resolution talked about, in Clause 4, asking for at least 2 community residents to be part of a planning and design committee. And this is actually addressed to the Friends of Hearst Pool, because I think you had raised the issue as well. We recently learned through the Parks and Trails Committee that Melvin Hazen would be included in the stormwater study, stormwater and sewage study. Just for the record, back in August, September at our ANC meeting, I asked for a design committee. I asked that these community members be involved. I suggested to DGS that the way to get buy-in from everybody, we're going to get into a lot of shouting matches at a lot of planning committees about whether a pool should be here, when if we're involved in a careful design and we're involved in careful input from everybody, we can mitigate a lot of the shouting, because there's been an awful lot of shouting, unfortunately. So I also endorse the idea of a design committee, but I want to get your ideas on that and how you see that unfolding, because that will be something that yes.
Well, as I said earlier, it's mostly been Jonathan, so I don't want to speak for him, but he has, every outreach he has made to the architect, people at DGS and DPR and DOEE, that woman from Urban Forestry, what's her name?
I can't remember her name.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Right. She's supposed to be extremely good, very talented. And so it's interesting that when Jonathan has reached out, there's absolutely no opposition to coming in and having that discussion. So I don't see that there shouldn't be opposition to, 3 or 4 people from the ward or from across the city being part of the final, not only the final choice of the, option, but everything going forward, from the material that, what does the pool deck look like? And we don't need to, micromanage, but we don't want a big slab of concrete. So what it would exactly look like, I can't answer that, I guess I'd put the question back to you, whether you've sensed an openness to it or a resistance to it.
I'm still assessing the idea of DOEE, DDOT, DPR, DGS, and perhaps even the schools or DCPS, kind of collectively with perhaps somebody from the mayor's office, certainly somebody from Councilmember Che's office, one or more commissioners here, one or more members of the community, just to sort of sit down separately and calmly walk through a lot of these issues, whether it's regarding stormwater, the fill dirt, parking issues, noise issues, light issues. In my mind, there's some sort of threshold issues. Ms. Brown, go ahead.
All that sounds fine, but the core of our idea is not that Hearst has been settled and now let's talk about the design issues. Right. Our core idea is that we want to look at a variety of alternatives, of which Hearst is most certainly one.
Well, help me understand, because I'm hearing two different things. I'm hearing the Cleveland Park Citizen Association approach that if all these issues can be addressed, then maybe a pool belongs there.
But they also call for a more open process looking at other sites.
Okay.
I mean, that's the key difference.
Which was never done.
Which was never.
It was a very important step in the process somehow was overlooked. And it's the step that's in DPR's own published master plan as to how they proceed from the master plan to implement any project, is to do this feasibility study and site selection. And the law provides for the expenditure of for any expenditure of funds in excess of $1 million, the process that has to be pursued. None of that happened. And so what we're really asking is to go back and say, we have the master plan where you've got the 1.5 mile radius of underserved area. We have available sites. Let's go back and do that step. No one's going to, the stakes of not building a pool for another 12 months, no one's going to truly suffer. We're talking about an amenity that should serve the ward appropriately, not necessarily me tomorrow.
Okay, so. Thank you. I don't have any other questions.
Can I just say one thing on that? We should just pull up the CPCA resolution because it says what it says. I don't recall it saying that other sites need to be considered. They certainly said
we'll take a
we
look
want
we
want certain concerns to be addressed.
No, yeah, we'll come up with our own resolution based on the input that we hear from you and from the other community discussions. Okay, well, thank you very much. This has been very helpful to me, certainly, to understand the views, understand some of the issues surrounding this. I hope it's been also useful to the other commissioners. This isn't over, certainly, and we as a commission will weigh in officially at some point. We may want to organize a separate meeting, not a conversation as part of our full monthly meeting when we have lots of other things, lots of other business to do, but a separate meeting just to talk about some of these issues. So we might consider that. Right?
Yep.
Thank you.
Before we close, is there anything anybody in the audience wishes to raise on this briefly? Any questions? You have a quick question? Would you come down to the mic so it broadcasts online, please?
Yes, I would just like to say that I live on Quebec Street, very close to the Hearst Park. I am a mother to 2 kids of 12 and 14, so maybe a little bit older family than the lady here. I do think that, of course, as everybody else, I would like to have a pool, but I would like to have a meaningful pool which does not destroy the environment, which use the proper water system, that has done the studies like what my colleagues here said, because if the master plan does exist, it's a duty of the city and the management of the city to to look at all the possibilities to suit that master plan which is made. Because the master plan, when you make in a city, when you make a master plan, you also look at the budgets, you look at how much the projects will cost, and there is no view that to make a small, non-efficient little pool in Hearst Park, where you will not be even able to service the community of 77,000 people, And on top, if you would like to make some kind of special project, which will be then different, not like a standard model of pools that usually the city uses, then even the cost of that pool will be even higher. So you will do like the more expensive, less efficient pool at the place where you would on top destroy the environment. So it doesn't make sense to just look at the horse park. It really makes sense. Go look at the master plan, look at what you have as the options, find the best option, and satisfy everybody. But we all want the pool. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Any other comments? Okay, thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. So that concludes that discussion. We will now move into other business. Is there any other business that any commissioner wishes to raise? No? There's one announcement I would like to make just quickly, something I forgot to raise during commissioner announcements. It's that DC Water has plans to do a small diameter water main replacement project on Brandywine Street, Brandywine and 31st Street. Construction is supposed to start March 2017, completion by July 2018. This sheet, there's an information sheet plus a map that they have sent us. They will probably come to our next meeting to talk about it, but we have this up on our website, www.anc3f.com, if anybody wants to take a look at the details. And there's also contact information. So please take a look at that if that's going to affect you on Brandywine Street. So if nothing else, then I'll just note that our next meeting will be April 18th here at UDC in this room. If no other comments or issues from the commissioners, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
A second.
All in favor? Passes. Thank you.
How you doing? Nice to meet you.